All right, welcome to the Environment and Transportation Energy Committee. Today is February 24th at 5:48 p.m. and we have a voting and work session. So with that said, thank you, everybody. I think we have one bill that we can discuss and kind of see where it goes that I think we're probably good to vote on because it seems not very controversial, but let's talk through it and make sure everybody's good with it and go through any of the questions. And that would be House Bill 648. It's a departmental bill. Seems pretty easy to me, but Steve, you want to run through it really quickly and then we'll go to,
Sure. I'll start with this one.
yeah.
Okay, House Bill 648. It's a departmental bill, reduces the age from 65 to 60, for which the Office of Home Energy Programs, OHEP, must develop a uniform redetermination process to assist eligible energy customers in enrolling in energy assistance programs. Basically, this builds on prior legislation that set a uniform redetermination process in place for 65 and older, and I'll get to what that is in just a second. But basically, this is taking an existing process that applies 65 plus and incorporating 60 to 64. So that is the universe, the population that we are including. Sorry, that this bill includes uh, for energy assistance programs. I'm sorry if my brain doesn't work. My toddler or my infant are not sleeping, and it's really it's really getting to my brain productivity. So I'm trying here. So sorry if I stutter for a second. That's what's going on.
Should have
Uh,
dropped you to Celsius. Sorry.
okay, so a couple things there. The redetermination process that applies. The way this will work is um, uh, the population is already eligible for an energy assistance program through OHEP, right? They're already eligible. They have it for a year, and you go to reapply the next year. The uniform redetermination process, as DHS puts in their testimony, is basically a simplified reapplication process. It's easier for the applicant and it's easier for the department. So it's a one page or a very short application process as opposed to a longer one. So what it does, it just facilitates a person who is already eligible historically. They recertify that they maintain eligibility and everything moves a little bit faster. It's easier for the individual, it's easier for the department. So that is basically what's going on. It DHS's testimony, and you can ask about this, but energy assistance funding is an amount typically. It's set. It's a combination of what comes from the federal government and what comes through the state budget. So this redetermination process, to the extent it leads to some people getting energy assistance where they otherwise would have dropped off, the overall amount through the state budget remains the same. So there's not a net increase in expenditures due to redeterminations. What could happen on a smaller scale, and DHS could talk to this potentially, let's say you have a couple hundred extra customers that receive energy assistance because the redetermination process is straightforward compared to the longer application process. You could have a couple hundred more customers in a given year, and that would sort of be their benefits would very slightly reduce. I think that the numbers you're talking about here, the relative numbers are small, very slightly reduce available funding across all the energy programs. I think I was looking at funding year to year, and it varies just due to funding that is available. And it varies fairly significantly year to year, as do applicants independent of this process. So it would be difficult or impossible. The noise that occurs in a given year due to applicants and funding is changing benefits uh, to a larger extent than a redetermination process that covers a small number of people. So anyway, those are some of that's the initial take on how the bill sort of works. And if there's questions, you can ask the department here, or if
So
I got anything wrong.
just to recap, to try to put this in more my language, there is no increase, there's no fiscal note to this, there's no increase in the budget to this. There is no, and Justin, you're gonna have to chime in on this. And can you just walk through that piece? I think that's a very important piece to make sure that everybody knows that there is no increase to the budget. The pot is what the pot is my understanding. And
Correct.
this just allows more people to be in the pot that have some energy needs. Is that correct, Justin?
This wouldn't enable more people to be in the pot. It would simply allow folks who were in the pot last year to have an easier time applying this coming year. So there were approximately 1,700 seniors who were aged 60 to 64 in the FY25 OHEP process. And those 1,700, if this bill were in place today, would be able to go through the easier application process to get those same energy benefits in this coming year. That's all that this bill would do, is to make it simpler for those 1,700. It may be more given next year, but I can only tell you what we had in that age pool in the prior year. So those 1,700 would have an easier application time in this round of the application process.
Okay.
If this bill were in effect.
Anna, can you make sure everybody gets in? There's a couple people that texted me that are in the waiting room. Thank you. Okay, so to be clear, those people applied. A lot of those people applied previously, but it was not this simplified process.
Correct.
So what it would do is just make it the 60 to 64 folks would make it easier for them to apply, but they already can apply under a different process, but it puts them in the same process that a 65 plus person is already currently in.
Yes, in that universe of 1,700, those are the folks who applied under the full application and were found eligible, and therefore they went through the longer, more arduous process. Those 1,700 are the ones that we would identify in the following year for redetermination, and therefore the easier process if this bill were to become law.
Okay, so there is no fiscal increase. I just need to make sure that everybody, I need to get this too. Okay, and then the last question that I have is, can you just give me an example of a couple of the key programs that are really helping people? Just give us how many programs are in here and about how many, can you just give us one or two of the most important ones?
I'm gonna kick that question to my colleague Rigel Moore, as she's the executive director of the Office of OHEP, and let her answer that question.
Good evening. So two things. We have different type of modes that you can apply for. So in this expedited application, so our categorical eligibility applicants, if you receive SNAP, TANF, mean tested veterans assistance, and the SSI, you can get kind of fast tracked as well through that. So it's a platform called E&E, and that's the issuing platform for all these benefits. It transmits over to the OHEP system, and we process those in a very streamlined way as well. So it's very a person who fits at the redetermination pool, they don't have to apply through redetermination. They can apply it through a categorical eligibility application as well. So they have options as to how they apply. But we offer 4 grant types. So it's the Maryland Energy Assistance Program, MEEP, that is funded by federal dollars. We have the Electric Universal Service Program, EUSP, that is state special fund. And then we have the Electric Arrearage Assistance Program. And then we have the Gas Arrearage Assistance Program. So these are all annual grants. However, our arrearage assistance, you can only get that once every 5 years. So I hope that answered your question.
I think it does. Okay, let's go to questions. Delegate Morgan, you're the first one up. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I gotcha. Thank you. I'm sorry I was a couple minutes late. So I'm looking at this thing very quickly and catching up. If I look at this thing correctly, and this is a DHS question, it appears that there are about 17,700 people currently enrolled in the program at age 65 and older. Is that correct?
1,700.
17,709.
Yeah, was that in their testimony? The 65
No,
plus?
no, we were actually doing some homework.
Right.
So to DHS, does that sound about right?
There are 1,700 folks in FY25 who would be applicable for this bill. So 60 to 64, 1,700.
Let's go backwards, please.
Okay.
Age 65 and older at the present time, there's about 17,000 people enrolled in the program.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then what you're proposing is that we'll add 1,700 more at age 60 to 64 along the way, correct?
That's correct.
And then there is, and it doesn't matter what type of fuel they're using to get their supplement, whether it be gas, whether it be electric, whether it be propane, whatever, they get assistance. Is that correct?
That is correct, but we do prioritize per fuel type. And that is with the expectation that we cannot place a 55-day hold on a bulk fuel type as we can do on electric. So everyone gets prioritized per fuel type, but we do assist all fuel types, if that makes sense.
So
But-
with
but
the
this bill-
person 55 days behind, if it was the middle of January per se, not get assistance till March?
No, they'll get assistance in January. We send out batches in each quarter.
Okay. And according to the fiscal note, is the amount of money put into the program annually prorated for inflation?
It is not prorated for inflation. I believe the amount of money that goes between these different energy assistance programs is based on the revenues received through the RGGI program, as well as some federal sources. I think there's multiple sources that go into these programs, but they're not, as far as I understand it, prorated, as you say, Delegate. It's based on what is directed to us from the governor's budget, and that comes directly from RGGI as well as federal dollars.
So if RGGI goes down and federal dollars go down, the budget goes down. So people would essentially get less by just by the math.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I know the answer to this, but I just want to clarify. So I understand that there's like 1,700 that would fall under this new category potentially. Does that mean if we put those folks in, does that in any way diminish the award that folks that are already inside of the program would get, like their assistance on their energy bill? Does it in any way say take folks from, I don't know, maybe they're getting $50 a month? Does it, if we throw these 1,700 people in, does it move them down to $40 a month? I just want to understand what would happen to the individuals. I understand the pot of money is not getting bigger, but if more people are in it, does that potentially mean that the award amount gets less to the individuals that are already receiving it?
Not for this bill, no.
Okay. All right.
And there's not, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not necessarily more people in it. There's more people expedited to be in it. In other words,
Right.
it's a shorter application program.
That is
Okay.
correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right. Thank you for that. That makes me think about it differently. Thank you.
Absolutely. Delegate Boyce.
Sorry, I was late. I had an impromptu meeting. And just to clarify, so the money allocated for these programs are based on RGGI money and the money that the governor puts into the budget for it.
So RGGI is a portion, so it's a
Yes.
state special fund. RGGI is a large portion of that, but it is ratepayer funds set by the Public Service Commission as well. So it is all both sources, and we have 400,000 annually from a Cove Point Dominion settlement.
Okay, so RGGI money, state money, this
Dominion Cove Point, and then we have Lockheed dollars. Yes.
okay.
LIHEAP
So
being federal.
I'm sorry, and what was that, Mr. Haynes?
LIHEAP being the portion that is federal.
Okay.
Yep.
But so there was a question about if RGGI money were to go down as a part of your allocation from all these sources, your pot of money goes down. And I guess I was asking, is your budget not created based on prior year like need or services? And how does that factor into how I think a little bit to Delegate Naraki was talking about what we give out. I don't know if I'm explaining this well enough. I don't think I'm explaining this well.
Delegate Boyce, do you mean if the bill were to increase the number of people year over year, which setting aside that it probably is a small amount, but if it were to, does the population drive the following year's budget is it circular, right? Is it not only budget being allocated to people? Is it people driving budget? Is that your
A
question?
little bit, yes, a little bit, but I'm wondering, right, if last year maybe your expenditures on through programmatics were, let's say it was like 1.2 million, and then this year you get 1.2 million, but maybe you have a need for 1.3 million. I guess I'm wondering, how do you fluctuate as it relates to this? And I think to a little bit to Council's point about maybe the increase of other folks in needs, how do you then manage to ensure that all these individuals, and I know 1,700 doesn't change, probably won't change won't change service or who may or may not be eligible or who may or may not get. But I'm just wondering from year to year, the amount that you expend as it relates to money, then you end up getting year per year, going up and down, up and down. So how does the fluctuation then affect your general pool and then the folks who then may be entered into that pool? I guess, I don't know. I don't think I'm making sense. I'm sorry. I haven't had any coffee.
I think I understand the question to be, does the annual budget of the program fluctuate based on the number of people in the program, or does it fluctuate based?
Yes. And their programmatic needs.
Correct. And I think the answer is the budget fluctuates based on the amount that comes into the RGGI fund and the amount that we receive from the federal government through LIHEAP largely. There are other state special funds that are included, but it's largely those two sources that supply the funding for these programs. And they are based on inputs from the RGGI program and any inputs that we get from the LIHEAP funding from the feds. There's nothing that says we have X participants in these programs and each of those participants must receive X dollars. So it is exclusively based on how many participants in the program, which program they're in, and how much money is allocated from RGGI and the LIHEAP sources at the federal level. So if there's 1,000 people in the program and $1 million, everybody gets $1,000.
Got it.
So it is based on that.
Okay, but again, if you had 1,000 folks, but if you had less, then it's just, I think to the point earlier, they would just get less. They would get something, they would just get less.
Correct.
They're be getting supported with 1,000 and you have less from your revenue sources, they would be getting 900 or 800, whatever it is, whatever the pot is divided evenly.
I'll let Rigel jump in here because it is a little bit more complicated, but that doesn't necessarily impact this bill. I'm happy to talk to you offline, Delegate Boyce, if like there's some other bill that you're considering, but
no, I think it just helps generally understand this process. I think a lot of us are, well, let me speak for myself. I think I'm just trying to understand the process that will help me understand the bill, and that's it. And I'm going to shut up. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry.
And just to keep it as high level as possible, we do as a program, we look at data trends and we we have a benefits matrix. So within this matrix, you can fall in per your federal poverty level, and you'll get a set benefit amount for that. So it's based on the applicants who applied last year and were remitted for grants versus this year. So that does inform how much money we get per household. And to your point, we do an EUSP annual plan, so we submit that to the Public Service Commission, and that is us kind of giving them different pots of how much we are asking to have for our program in order to expend. So that's usually approved, and it is approved annually from the Public Service Commission, and that's what helps us get our budget as well.
Got it. Okay, I think that's what I was looking for. I appreciate it. Thank you for going around the circle with me. Thank you.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just wanted to clarify for my own understanding. We're not changing the funding. We're not changing the mechanics of it. We're making it easier for people who have already applied to reapply in the future. Is that
correct?
Summary?
Correct. Within this limited age band, just those seniors who are already eligible and already within the program, at least for the preceding year, they'll be able to recertify more easily. That's it.
Right.
That's all it's built.
So again, it's not changing funding. It's not increasing the number of people in the pot. It's just for the people who are already in the pot, for a certain segment of them, it's easier for them to reapply.
Correct.
Fantastic. Move the bill, Mr. Chair.
Okay. The
Second.
bill,
Second.
okay. So any questions? Because I have one. Justin, I guess this is kind of best for you. Do you have any data on like assessments on how we determine its effect eligible people's behavior? Like any outcome data?
We don't have I think this goes to the vice chair's question from the bill hearing, wherein she was asking whether or not we knew how many folks may have dropped out of the process for the application complexity. And I think unfortunately this is a question that's sort of unknowable, because we don't have a survey after the fact that says why did you complete half of the application but not complete the rest of it. We only know what age groups and economic strata and such apply and are successful under the eligibility criteria that we have. We don't know who may have filled out half the application and dropped off. We don't have good data on that. So I, unfortunately, that's not a question I can answer fully, but I hope that addresses why we don't know the answer to that question.
It does. I'm just thinking through. Okay, are there any other questions on this bill? Delegate Naraki, I see your camera off. Do you have any specific questions? Are you good with this bill, or where are you? Okay. Everybody else good? So I guess we have a first and a second.
Oh,
Go ahead, Delegate Boyce, did you have a?
I thought there wasn't a second. I'm sorry. There was, sorry.
Okay, now in order to vote, you got to be on camera. That's you, Delegate Morgan, I think. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? No one opposed. Okay, no. Okay. The bill passes. Thank you, everyone, very much. Okay, let's go now for more discussion purposes. How about we go to House Bill 642? And then I want to go to some study bills, but House Bill 642, that's Delegate Long's bill, electric companies, service outages and rate increases. I know we have some potential last minute amendments that maybe we don't have to vote on it, but we can talk about a little bit about it, Steve.
Yes, we can talk about sort of I was just going to run through the bill. Then we're going to talk about this one and run through the bill, some of the concerns brought up in testimony, and then I was working with the sponsor who had a potential option as an amendment to sort of get at the concerns and sort of why.
Right.
Sort of, I was just going to give a brief overview. Hopefully I can keep this pretty quick.
Right, and there's a little bit of a ratepayer ambiguity that we need to address, right?
Well, yes, as introduced, the utilities pretty much all sent testimony about the fact that it would be expensive to do and difficult to implement in its current form. So the
Let's
bill,
just start. Yeah,
I'll just cover the basic bill. Annual April 1 each year, report to each electric company. In that case, that's electric company for purposes of a public utilities article is important. That's everybody. That's the broadest term. So electric company includes investors, investor-owned utilities, plus the cooperatives, plus the municipals. That's the term of art. So this is each electric company. When you see that, it's all of them. Otherwise, you have to go more specific. So this is all of them. They have to report to PSC geographic and demographic data on all customers impacted by service outages and rate increases for the immediately preceding year. Must include geographic and demographic data on all customers impacted by service outage lasting longer than 2 hours or maintenance, and then additional information on service outage, let's see, including regardless of duration occurring during an inclement weather event. So a couple things here that were difficult for the utilities to implement. Geographic and demographic data is not defined. Some of the utilities, absent that it's not defined, you could define it, but absent that, the utilities don't collect granular demographic data like that. There might be some that's available, but they don't. Multiple utilities reported that they did not collect that kind of data. In addition, the bill itself, the reporting requirement is somewhat duplicative of existing reliability reporting that is occurring. Back in 2011 through 2014, there were several like major storms, and including the derecho. I remember sitting in my house without power for 6 or 7 days. There were General Assembly passed several bills to address reliability, including annual reporting requirements related to reliability, and that mechanism is ongoing. It continues to this day. There's annual reporting requirements. I'm seeing multiple hands, so I can just stop for a sec.
Yeah, why don't we?
Oh, we're gonna hold off? Okay. I'm wrapping up here. So there's existing reporting requirements that include some of this information. One of the things that those annual reports require is a list of what is called the poorest performing feeders. And that is basically down at the distribution level, the worst performing feeders, which I believe is, I think it's just either past the substation, or I don't know the exact engineering definition, but it's relatively small area and relatively localized number of customers. It's every year the ones that are the worst, and they are supposed to be remediated every single year, and there's like a follow-up and reporting process. Now what that looks like, and this gets to the amendment, what that looks like is a list with just like the substation or like the feeder name, and then sort of like the how many customers it serves, and then some of the reliability metrics. The amendment would basically require a map of where those are. Right. So the list already exists, and which is not really, you can't really tell where they are just by the list, just the name. But if you could basically put them on a map and see where they are, which would cover some of the concerns with the initial bill, while also being much more straightforward to implement than this ongoing reporting and detailed data. So that's what the sponsor was thinking as I talked to him earlier today.
And it'd probably be easier for the average person to go in and look at a map than it would be to see a substation outage or something like that. That's fairly technical.
So yeah, a little more straightforward too. And then the reader can draw whatever conclusions they want about the clustering or not of the worst performing feeders. And that happens every single year. It's a new batch of feeders usually. It's a new batch because they're remediated, that they get fixed, and then there's a new worst batch, and that happens on an annual basis. So that's what I have.
Okay, so that's his kind of idea, kind of broad stroke. So we don't really have an official amendment yet, just still talking. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much. I want to clarify the why of the bill. And so I guess the question is why do we need this information, however we clean it up, and what will it then do as it relates for information that the PSC will have and utilities have? Like what is the outcome of then having this report?
I don't know if that's probably more a me question. I don't know.
No, I mean, I don't know if council, if Steve or you,
If I may, Delegate Tari.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead, Andreas.
So I think, again, without the amendment, maybe that doesn't help that much. But some of the information provided by the feeder level, as Steve was explaining, gives you the location of where these issues are. Normally, a feeder is associated with from a substations to a community, right? And I think the intent of the bill was to kind of identify those areas and ensuring that they weren't always targeted areas. Let's put it that, using that word. I know I'm adding words to what the hearing said, but that's kind of where the conversation was going. Knowing where the feeders are and knowing where as Steve said, every year the poor performance are going to be shown, so you would know where they are. It is a benefit currently for those utilities to know where they are because it's easier for them to identify the issues. There could be just their end of life issues or they're overloaded in some way, shape, or form, and they need to fix. Right now, the information gives you that. The bill gives you more of ensuring that it's not targeted to specific areas. I think that, as Steve was explaining, some type of amendment where you would visualize where the feeders are instead of just having the name of it would get you to the same point. Because it's the name of the feeder is not a constant name. It's up to each company to do it however they want to do it. So it really, the list doesn't give you enough information. But if you can
And-
visualize it or identify it, you get to that point.
And I guess the second, point I want to make is that what we're saying also is that the utility companies are not doing this, deep dive in identifying these the feeders or the areas where the feeders are
I'd say
not
they
performing well.
They absolutely are
Mhm.
listing the feeders down, and I can send you an example of this offline.
Sure.
They are absolutely identifying them. It's down, and there's all the different reliability indices per feeder. It's just on a chart, and it's just looking at it, you
Not
can't tell where
digestible.
they are.
Right.
But
It's
that's
not
they absolutely are
necessarily
identifying.
that it's not reported, it's not transparent to the general consumer is what I'm
I
maybe.
would say that
Yeah.
it being buried on a hard to find case on PSC, I had a difficult time finding it, and I knew
Interesting.
I worked on the original bill.
Yes.
So, but they are there, and there's a lot of information in them. They're just, but yeah,
And I would just add, sorry, to Delegate, to your point, as Steve said, it's there. It's hard to get from the PSC, but also the data that you get, unless you are in that company, you don't know. For example, if I give you the name of the feeder that appears in the list, unless I know exactly the address for that feeder is, which
Uh-huh.
and Steve could correct me, I don't think the list only gives like the name
it does.
It does give you the specific area.
No address.
Oh, okay, exactly.
it.
So with the list, you wouldn't be able to say, okay, this are the communities more impacted. You would need to have that information, which is normally at the IOU, of the electric company's
Got
database.
And then there's nobody from a utility in this meeting.
No, there are a couple folks. I can call on
I'll lower my hand. I'll let somebody else talk. We can do that later. So thanks so much.
Sure. And I will say this, Delegate Boyce, that is my exact understanding of the bill. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said transparency. It's just really to take all this data and make it easy to digest so the average person can go and look potentially at a zip code or a neighborhood and go, is this a recurring problem? What's going on in this neighborhood? Is this neighborhood traditionally unreliable or not? That's my big broad picture understanding. Let's see. Let's go ahead to Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple questions, just kind of clarifying questions. Why 2 hours? Is there something significant about 2 hours versus 4 hours versus 6 hours? Like why that period of time? Is that an arbitrary number that we picked, or is there a reason that is in the bill?
Give me a sec to check. It's not related to the existing reliability statute, so I can tell you that it's not mirroring the existing statute, but I do not know otherwise.
That seems like a really short period of time. That's the reason I was asking that question. Okay, so that answers that. When the bill says all customers, so does that mean not just residential individuals, but is that commercial customers? Is that governments? Is that like everybody? I'm just trying to understand what information we're trying to gather here.
In absence of it saying residential customer, that would normally refer to all customer classes. And this is a new section, so it's not defined. But yes, typically in absence of it saying residential, usually the public utilities article or bills will specify residential if they mean residential only.
That's kind of what I was thinking there. So I'm just kind of like, I mean, maybe it's important that we know that McDonald's, the milkshake machine is down every couple days, but maybe that's not really what we're going for here in that. So that's just a thought. When you do that, so maybe this is you, Steve, or maybe it's somebody else. How does that show up? Like, I'm thinking about my county, for instance, right? If there's like a county building, does that just say like Baltimore County government, or does it say like, you know, this building in Baltimore County got like, I'm trying to understand what that would give us if it just said Baltimore County government is without power. But like, you understand what I'm saying there? Like,
It's by meter, and government meters are across, it depends, right? It's usually by building. So it or like a campus. A lot of them are master metered. So it would just depend on the nature of the meter that is out. The utility would have information related to the billing account and the meter that is being billed, whatever one that happens to be. And sometime, you know, and that depends. A single campus could have multiple ones, or one campus could have one. It just sort of depends.
okay, so like I don't know, Towson University, which is in Baltimore County, there could be multiple there, right? Because the scope of the size is something like that, right? So that kind of is what you're talking there, like where there could be more than one meter there.
I don't see any reason why there couldn't be. I don't know the specifics.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what that means. And then my final question is, for reporting data, like what happens in a circumstance where maybe we're talking about an apartment unit, maybe we're talking about a short-term rental where you've got like a traveling nurse or something like that, where you're renting the place out every couple months. Whose data are we reporting April 1st? Are we reporting like all 4 tenants that have possibly been in that place over, you know, each quarter of the year? Like what is the data that we're getting there?
I just think we're getting that node, whatever that node is that's
And,
out.
Okay.
Right, Chris?
But then if you're just getting that node, like, I guess what I'm getting at, Mr. Chair, is like,
You bring up an
there could be
interesting
different
point about
demographic groups of people that are living in the same unit during the course of the year. So if you're trying to get demographic data, what are you getting there?
I think you're speaking to the difficulty of implementation of the bills introduced.
Okay, fair enough. I'm just okay. All right. So I think you understand where my head here, where I'm trying to wrap it around. That's all. I'm just trying to understand.
And I think that's one of the points that the PSC actually brought up, which is the definition of those words make it a little bit difficult to delineate exactly what you're reporting in those two areas.
Yeah, the geographic part it probably isn't too hard, but the demographic part, to your point, Delegate, is going to be challenging. But there's sort of, there's an amendment. There's some other pieces of this we can work on. Delegate Morgan.
Gotta get the audio off. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I remain concerned on the bill based upon the Pepco and Delmarva that they say they already do this kind of stuff in the I'm reading their testimony. Provide the PSC with robust reliability reporting by law and by regulation designed to measure outage duration, causes, and performance. Then, Stephen, you're talking about the poorest performing substations. There's nothing in my mind that clarifies that you could have the poorest performing substation could be in the most wealthy area of the state, and the best ones could be in a poor area, just hypothetically. So how do you sort of sort the wheat from the chaff there? And then to your point, Mr. Chair, you said, is there anybody here from the power company on? And I see that Dennison is on here from SMECO, which represents which actually represents part of Delegate Long's district, including mine. And he could provide some clarifying information from the utility, since we're reading and he's their person. So that
Yeah, okay, so let's go there. I do want to circle back, Delegate Morgan, to what I had said earlier, because I think this is really important part. Yes, they are collecting that data, but again, it is not the point of one of the big points of this bill, as I understand it, is that it's not in a digestible form that myself or you that isn't in the industry. I mean, look at, Steve said it took him a while to find it. So a lot of this is about making it digestible. So you, Todd Morgan, can go and find out in your area or in your in your region where there may be a continual problem. So I think that's the big piece. But with that said, does any of the Tom, do you want to jump in, or Tim Troxel, or anybody else want to jump in as to what your concerns may be? Because I understand them, but
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is Tom Dennison with SMECO. I do appreciate the conversation. What I think it would be helpful to know that for, and I can't speak for the other utilities, but for SMECO, for instance, when we have a feeder, a worst performing feeder, those feeders are named like Ridge 21 or Patuxent Park 13, those types of things. So you get an idea of the area. And I know that I've dealt with realtors and others who have called me and asked for certain reliability numbers for things. So we try to respond to them. But the arbitrary nature of the 2 hour time thing doesn't make a lot of sense because there were certain areas in our service territory just yesterday who had power outages for more than 2 hours that were different circumstances. So I think that's really difficult to comply with, and so I'll just kind of leave it at that and answer any questions. But I appreciate you offered me a time to talk about it.
Yeah, okay. So Tom, let me hold on, please. Tom, so let me follow up with what you just said.
Sure.
In the case of the real estate agent that's asking for something,
Mhm.
do they understand that number, that ridge, or whatever it is, or do you understand, or do you agree with the premise of the bill to better define a region or a zone or an outage? Do you? What is your thought on the original thought or the premise of the bill?
Well, I mean, I think I'm in agreement with the other utilities that say that that information is very readily available through someone calling in to ask about a certain area. We have the reliability metrics, Mr. Chair, I know you understand, are SAIDI and SAFI, the duration and frequency, and we can look at that right down to a certain address or a certain area. And we're required to report on ones that aren't performing well. So I feel like the bill is duplicative and very difficult to comply with.
Okay, understood your position. Tim?
I was just going to, thank you, Chair. I was just going to agree with Tom. We have a reliability group. They know which house, which feeder is down, how many minutes it's down. We have to report all of that to the Public Service Commission. And our worst performing circuits, we have to fix them every year so that they don't come up the next year. If they do, we get in trouble for that. So those 3 worst performing circuits are constantly changing. And customers call us all the time and ask about how many minutes they've been out, and we can tell them that directly. So it seems very duplicative, and we know meters. We don't know who lives in those inside those meters. So the demographic questions that were in the bill were very concerning to us.
Okay. Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of wonder, I'd like to go back to Delegate Boyce's original questions, the intent of the bill. And I think I understand the intent of the bill from the sponsor, and I also understood the mapping process to make it easier for, let's say, people like us to see it more readily, or people in the public to look it up and see it more readily. However, I'm not sure that the sponsor of the bill, and maybe he did realize that all of this information was already available. And if the end point, and maybe this isn't the end point, but if the end point of this bill is to collect information so that the worst performing sectors or theaters are repaired and that those neighborhoods don't remain the worst performing, it sounds like that's already required and happening. So I'm not sure what other than just curiosity for us, I'm not sure what else could come from us knowing more. I mean, if anyone, I just don't, I mean, it's a nice idea, but it is an extra step on an already stressed system. They're already identifying and repairing. If they weren't required to and repair, then I would say, yeah, let's do this and keep an eye on it. but they are, and they can't have those same areas come up year after year, is what I'm hearing. I mean, and I guess I could ask Steve, is that accurate?
You're muted, Steve.
Sorry, yes, they are. That is accurate. They remediate and they report on the remediation. It's in the same, you kind of like see a multi-year process in each of the reports.
Right. And so, Vice Chair Guyton, what I would say is that, again, my understanding is that just to make it more simple for the average person to get that information and understand it. But with that said, I do go back to something we talked about before, which is the ratepayer impact. And that's a little bit, we're trying to figure that piece out too, because the demographic piece is kind of hard to define. And the ratepayer impact, if we pass this bill, then the Tim and the Tom and everybody else, they're going to come back and say, okay, well, what does this look like? And we know we don't want to do anything that's negatively going to impact the ratepayer. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know we're talking about this bill for discussion, so I think it's important to have these conversations. Right. I would have been supportive of the bill, at least a portion of the bill. I do not want to give all of my demographic information to any company that doesn't need it, and I think most of my constituents feel that way also. So that I would never be supportive of. But however, I would have been supportive for the reporting part if it was going to lead to something. I really don't see what it could lead to other than just satisfying curiosity. And if there's a possibility that satisfying curiosity will lead to higher ratepayer bills, that's not something I would consider.
Gotcha. That's why we're working through. Delegate Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I think you took the words out of my mouth a bit, but I was going to further just say it sounds like, again, that given a subject matter expert like counsel Steve Ross could not find this information, what it sounds like I could say the potential intent is just transparency. And is there a way that we can get, I don't know if it requires a bill or not, how do we, because it's clear between SMECO and Potomac and BG&E and PEPCO, they probably store this information somewhere all differently. And if there's a way that we can figure out how to say that this information just has to be a little bit more readily available and transparent and a little bit more in layman's term for the general customer, and maybe that's the issue or the solution. But somebody like me who just likes to turn the thermostat up and down and then pay all of my money once a month, I personally am not going to be like, well, let me go check and see what's going on with these feeders. But somebody else will, and who has that knowledge. And so the question becomes, is this more of a bill about asking how we present this information in a more readily available and easily accessed way versus, because that's the only intent I see here. Other than that, I'm not sure. And I think to the Vice Chair's point, I think I can't support something that's already going to make any of us pay any more per month. But if this is a way that we can figure out together, again, it may take this bill, it may not take this bill, but that this information can be on these sites where they already are, but more readily available and more transparent and easily to read for the customer is something certainly I would support.
Right. So what I like to do is that's I think everybody's chimed in here. I think there's I think that the council, I think Steve, you've had some conversations with the bill sponsor. We have an idea of where the subcommittee is on this. There are some concerns with demographic reporting. I think Delegate Boyce, you're exactly right. This it seems to me could turn into a transparency type of a bill, but that's potentially about it. So why don't we circle back with the bill sponsor and see what his thoughts are, and then we'll just hold the bill for now and then come back to it or not at a later date if we can work some of these things out that make sense, and if we can't, that's fine too. Good. All right. So what time is it? It is 6:37. So why don't we take up at least one study bill to at least have a conversation about, and then we'll go from there, kind of see how that goes. Do you want, why don't we go with HB 54? Task Force to study restructuring Maryland's utility industry. I know Delegate Allen, you've been working on some potential amendments. Steve, do you want to kind of kick it off and then we'll walk through a little bit? Again, not voting on this, just talking about it. We have 3 other study bills as well. I was hoping to get through some of those study bills, but let's get at least an idea of what one study bill looks like. And just for the committee's edification, we're probably going to look at a bunch of study bills. And then as we get closer to crossover and we have a good idea of all the study bills that are out there and where our holes are, then I think that starts to become a leadership call as to what we can afford to do and not do. But in the meantime, Steve, you want to do
Sure.
down?
Yes. So this is a task force. All the other ones today were studies, but this is a task force, and it is a task force. It's pretty large as far as task forces go. So it established the task force to study restructuring Maryland's electric utility industry. PSC staffs the task force. The report is due by November 1, 2027, as introduced. I'm not going to go through all of the bullets of what it means, but to someone who has worked in this area a while, restructuring, I initially thought that this meant going back to vertically integrated. So the utilities own the generation, they own the distribution, they own the transmission, they own everything, right? That is the study. The bullets in the bill don't really get to that specifically. It's actually more about different ownership models, different utility ownership models, in addition to some other things. But for example, studies for restructuring the utility industry, such as publicly owned utilities, cooperatives, and public utility districts. We already have some cooperatives in Maryland, but they serve like 5-ish%, maybe 8 to 10 tops. It's not many. Most electric customers in Maryland are served by the investor-owned utilities. It's 90% plus. That's not the case in every state. Some states have a much higher co-op or municipal or public power amount than we do. So that's just one way to look at it, or that's one portion of what I was going to look at. But this does cover just a bunch of different ways that the utility industry could work in Maryland, is how I would describe it. It's a pretty large task force, and it includes cost and benefit analysis. I will note the fiscal note has $1 million spread across 2 fiscal years. To me, that makes sense. Anytime you have something this large that involves estimating costs in the utility industry, it's going to take consultants and it's going to cost money. So that's the highlight of it. There were a couple different amendments. I know the sponsor has multiple amendments. One of them added members. One of them added members and added to what the task force would study. Added a few more things to what it would have to study. Added a cost benefit analysis. Additional look at emerging technologies, and then asking and answering the question why distribution rates for electric companies owned by Exelon have outpaced inflation, in addition to how to decrease the rise in electric distribution system costs. So no matter under any of these amendments, it is a significant task force with a very large charge and a very large membership. I believe there was one more amendment that would have made it 1 year instead of 2 years. A 1-year study instead of a 2-year study is a very large study. It made sense, at least to me, to have it be 2 years based on the amount that is in here. And you would have to keep in mind, if it was a shorter study, a shorter task force, the costs fall into a shorter time. So the fiscal effect probably condenses.
So I think it's important. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, Steve. Did you?
OPC had some suggested amendments as well, expanding it out to, I believe, gas rather than just electric, and also making sure that task force membership didn't include too much utility I believe is described as influence in their testimony. Just with a task force, the report's going to be voted on, right? So it's different from a study. So the members of the task force will find some sort of consensus. So OPC had raised issues about the voting membership and how it's allocated. That's basically what I have on this.
Okay, so I think this is a good opportunity for, and most people probably already know this, but the big difference that between a study and a task force. So the task force will have to be, there'll have to be personnel that will run it. And at the end of it, folks are voting. So versus a study, if it's run by professionals, you're getting a report that says, this is what we recommend, versus a task force is a little bit more of a compromise kind of a thing. But Steve, I don't know. I mean, you and I have had a conversation about this bill on that particular subject. Did you want to elaborate on kind of the differences? I think it's just important for people to know very quickly the differences between it being a study versus a task force.
I think you covered it pretty well, but if you were to have it be a study directed by one agency, you would get that agency's, probably their staff or their consultant's professional opinion, and that's pretty much it. And Wade, however, whatever happens internally with that, what those staff's personal opinions and professional opinions are. With the task force, you're building consensus. The recommendations usually have to pass a vote for the final report. Typically in task forces, the chair does have a lot of say over how setting the agenda and how things go, but it's also subject to, it still has to get, the final report still has to get voted on, and recommendations still have to get voted on. And if it's a contentious issue, sometimes the recommendations wouldn't have enough. You don't have majority support for it. So it just depends on the nature of the task force, how much of a difference there maybe is, but there certainly can be. It's also a more public forum. So like
Okay.
that's the other
Alright.
piece. That's the other side of it. It is a more public forum, and you have public meetings, and you have testimony, and you're hearing from people, and it's
It's more of a potential. It's more of a potential compromise, like what we do, as opposed to
who's the chair.
straightforward what professionals are suggesting we do. Is that fair, Steve?
I think that's a fair representation of the difference. Yes.
Okay. Delegate Guyton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to give the sponsor props for bringing this bill. I know he's trying to do something significant for the ratepayers out there. And I think I'm also a co-sponsor on the bill. And at the same time, I'm going to let you fight it out in the octagon of studies and workforce, right? Because this is what we have to do. It's an expensive one, right? It's an expensive one. So I'm asking, and I have been guilty myself of sponsoring work groups, task forces, commissions, things like that. And I would say sometimes they're really necessary. And I agree, if we don't have these answers anywhere else. And sometimes they're not. They're more performative, where people just do presentations, the group listens, they don't contribute that much, and they end up just signing off on a report. How can you make the argument that this one falls into the former and not the latter scenario?
Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if I need to be
Oh,
recognized.
go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you for waiting.
So I mean, honestly, I'm not married to any one structure for the task force or study. I've been talking with the subcommittee chair. Again, we're working on additional amendments. That's why we're kind of discussing this week instead of trying to move it.
Right.
Because the other proposal that we've come up with that I think, if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
and I was talking actually today with Ben Baker from the PSC, a way to make it cheaper, because it is, like Steve said, it's a pretty ambitious, it's a pretty large, and I actually had amendments to make it larger, task force. I think roughly the same mission could be accomplished through other means. So what we're looking at is making this a report from the PSC, who would be the leader of the task force anyway, and the PSC can reach out to the appropriate experts, gather this information, and then report back to the General Assembly at the end of a given time. And I think that would accomplish basically the same mission, because again, my intent has always been to have the PSC lead this anyway. It's just something, like I said, my intent at the start of this was, to make it big and then we can cut it down, So I'm open, again, I'm open to feedback. I'm open to working with the subcommittee to figure out, again, not just a way to make this cheaper, but to make sure it's doing what we want it to do, and really making sure that we accomplish the mission that I set out to when I first thought up this bill and brought you on, Madam Vice Chair, as a co-sponsor, is, let's look at our utility industry holistically. Again, for the first time since 1999, let's look at this and see if the structure that we are using currently is what's giving us the most bang for our buck for the ratepayers. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, that was a kind of roundabout.
No, it actually gave me a better answer than I expected. I was just going to let you argue for the bill, and you threw out a whole nother paradigm there. So thank you for that. I think
My motto this year is I just want to move needles forward. I want to get wins when I can get them. I want to collaborate. I want to amend. I want to, let's work on this. So
right.
that's
And
where
I
I'm
appreciate
open to.
your flexibility and answering that question and sharing those options with us. I think we're all worried a little bit about fiscal notes this year, and doability, but you're right. These are questions that we need to be able to answer at some point. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So why don't we hold this? Why don't we hold this like we talked about? We were holding these. And I know, Delegate Allen, you and I have had several conversations. I know you're working on these pieces. Continue to please work, to try and work on that fiscal note and the scope to get some efficiency and some cost, because those are the big issues. Ben, did you have anything that you wanted to add, or are you just going to continue to work with the sponsor to try and kind of address?
We're happy to continue to work with the sponsor on the bill. So yeah, nothing to add unless you had questions. So yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Ben. No, sorry, I didn't even see you were on, Ben. I'm sorry.
I'm here.
No, and like I said, we requested those amendments today. So as soon as we have them, we will share them with you, Mr. Chair, and with Ben, and with whoever else wants to see them.
Okay, that is great. Okay, so we're holding this one. Delegate Stein, did you have anything on this before we?
I did. I'm sorry for the lateness of my comment. I just wanted to say I appreciate Delegate Allen's the comprehensiveness of what he's proposing. I would prefer something that's more focused on, I mean, they're still very big issues, but some of the ones that we've sort of in our briefings determined are, potentially at the source of increasing rates. I mean, such as PJM practices, increased supply costs, increased distribution costs. So focus on the ones that seem to be right in front of us, as opposed to looking at alternative structures and stuff like that. But, in the end, I'll vote for whatever version of this bill is recommended by the subcommittee.
Thank you. And don't forget, we have other study bills as well. So this isn't the only one. All right. Thank you, Delegate Allen, for working on that. It is now 6:50, so we're getting a little bit late. Let's just very, very quickly touch. We'll just call it a night. We'll touch on one more small bill or one more study bill, 629, and then after that we'll be done for the night. And we can come back for the other study bills another night. Steve, can you run through this?
Sure.
We don't have a lot of time. I know we have places to go.
Okay.
I'd like to just run by a second study.
Sure. So House Bill 629, this is the Maryland Energy Administration is required to conduct a study on land-based wind energy generating systems in the state. And the bill authorizes MEA to use SEAF, which it would anyway, but it explicitly authorizes it too. The report's due December 1, 2026, so the report would be back before next session. The study in its current form would cost $200,000 for a consultant. I can usually guess that is relatively cheap for a study, particularly a consultant study. The study itself, the total potential for land-based wind energy generation in the state, a description of the locations used to determine that potential, and then information on locations in the U.S. where mitigation efforts have been successfully employed to allow wind energy, wind farms, and military radar technologies to successfully operate in the same area, and those mitigation efforts. The bill in the hearing was basically described as there is land-based wind. There is enough wind in Maryland for land-based wind, particularly as technology has gotten better over the years. There's a little bit of land-based wind out in Western Maryland. In 2012, 2013, there were some attempts to put some land-based wind on the Eastern Shore. Pax River has it's their the Adams system. They basically have a radar system that I'm messing up the exact terminology here, but the wind turbines could potentially mess with the testing, right? That's what's going on. So there is law right now requiring, there's something called a CPCN exemption, and that most land-based wind would get. It's sort of a quicker way to construct land-based wind. In that requirement, in statute, you have to get it, you have to be outside of, there's a bubble around Pax River up to 46 miles. So it's like a circle. That covers a good bit of the southern Maryland and a little bit over onto the Eastern Shore. A young enterprising fiscal note analyst back in 2012 actually put a map in his fiscal note at the time. So there is a map of what that looks like.
That fiscal writer is really good at reading graphics, right?
So yes, so that one's a little bit, it's not an MS Paint. So there's that in law, and then a year or 2 years later, there was actually an even bigger bill that was passed, and it basically created a cone around Pax River. Kind of, if you imagine the Earth's surface is like this, right? It's a little bit like this, and this is Pax River. It created a cone based on like how far away and how high up in the air you are, where you could not have wind turbines. And that passed the General Assembly, but was vetoed by the governor. And that is where it is. And the testimony was basically, and that has scared off land-based wind development in Maryland, because that was the message sent, basically. So the study is basically, I think, the testimony was basically, times have changed a little bit, technology is better, let's see what is available. That was the basics of the study. And are there mitigation efforts that can work? Let's look at them. That's the basics of the study. It's a very short study. That's what I have.
Okay, we'll just move through this really quickly. Delegates time.
I like this study. I'll just say that, since it's new and maybe could attract new interest in land-based wind. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Morgan, I know you're fairly well educated on Pax River.
I am actually. I've been doing this stuff over there at PAX for years, and quite frankly, I talked to their Navy guys the other day, and they're going to be pushing back on anything that interferes with that Adams radar system. I know that Delegate Anderson made comments about what goes on at Wallops. I cannot verify what radars Wallops uses for tracking satellites. I did check with PAX, and none of the PAX radars interfere or work with, whenever there's shots, they're complementary, but none of our radar systems do any tracking of anything coming out of Wallops. I do know that, as was said, yeah, the technology gets better. I'll say the technology gets better at both ends, and the level of fidelity and resolution that comes out of Adams and some other stuff, I use the word that way, they're doing over there, is still hypersensitive. And like I said, if we don't study it, I think you're going to come up with the same answers again out of Pax River. Now, what they do up in the upper part of the Eastern Shore that's outside, I use the cone that I think that Stephen used. I mean, I can't talk about that because I don't know. And maybe there's something north up there that could be considered. But the other part I'm going to say, from a non-Pax River point of view, is that we spend a lot of time making sure that solar farms and now wind farms all go over on the Eastern Shore as much as we can get. And I have to take into consideration, even though I don't live there, those people have lives in things too. And while we are promoting wind and solar and all this other stuff, it just seems that the spot is going to be, we'll do it on the Eastern Shore. There's less people over there. They got a lot of land, and what the heck, is not in my backyard. So with that being said, I know where the Navy's going to come back on this thing. I feel confident in that, but I do want to throw those other 2 points out there, because we can always do studies, and It always seems to be let's dump it on the Eastern Shore. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, just in a little bit of balance, Delegate, I would say that there's a lot of community solar, a lot of community solar going on in Western Maryland. There is also wind in Western Maryland as well. And the last thing I'll say, and then you and I can take it offline if you want, and that is nobody's forcing anybody to put any solar arrays in anybody's farm. If that's up to the farmer, if they decide that they want solar, that's up to them. Nobody's forcing anybody on the Eastern Shore. There's a lot of opportunity on the Eastern Shore, but nobody's forcing anybody on the Eastern Shore to put up wind turbines or put up solar. We can have more of a conversation later if you'd like, but Delegate Naraki. But I will say also, point well taken, Delegate. I got you. Delegate Naraki, and then we'll just kind of hold it and have some conversation later about it. And I know people have places to go. We're going on 7 o'clock. So you get the last word, Delegate Naraki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of on the same lines of Delegate Morgan, I would be curious not only what the Navy has to say with Pax River, but I'd also be curious what the Army has to say. In my district, we have Aberdeen Proving Ground. There's a lot going on in the northern part of the bay there. They're not necessarily flying as many planes, but there's a lot of drones, a lot of other stuff that goes on there. So I'd be curious of the Army's perspective as well before we would move with this.
Gotcha. I mean, we don't want to do anything that's going to compromise national security or anything. So
yep.
I don't think anybody wants to do that. All right. Thank you all very, very much for this work session. I learned a lot. I hope everybody else did learn a lot. And we'll come back next week with either some changes and some amendments to a couple of these bills or a new list, and we'll continue the education. And I want to thank my lovely subcommittee for all of your hard work and dedication. I know it's 7 o'clock, so thank you.